what we don't know and what will be fascinating for me to watch is how Bitcoin responds in the next global liquidity crisis. Don't forget, the Constitution of the United States protected gold. Period. QED, King's English, only gold, only silver.
Central banks may have been playing the long game all along. What if, decades ago, they saw the potential for a digital currency and deliberately crowdsourced its development? Imagine letting the smartest people in the world build the on-ramps, off-ramps, and infrastructure, only to co-opt it later. He even mentions hearing, though he's not sure it's true, that the first academic paper on digital currencies came from NSA employees. Whether or not that's accurate, it underscores his point. The state could be seeding enthusiasm for technologies it plans to control.
If you use Bitcoin, you're going to get thrown in prison for 10 years. Game's over. Now, but the Bitcoin guys are now all, they started as this very libertarian movement and young. Revolutions are fueled by young, and in particular young men, no offense, but young men are the ones who are skateboarding down railings and breaking their wrist every day and stuff like that. So it started very libertarian, and now they're all excited that Larry Fink is in on the game and that the government's in on the game. I'm going, you guys are signing off on precisely what it is you defied, and that is government. So I find there's a paradox in that bit of thinking. But if I wanted to bring in, for example, let's say 20 years ago, I knew we were heading for some central bank digital currency, right? The claim that the three NSA guys wrote the first paper on digital currencies. I don't know if that's true, but I keep hearing it. I think it would be brilliant to crowdsource debugging that process. So you release it. You really want to get sinister, you say, okay, Max and Stacy, you guys are going to hype it. I don't go that far, but the idea of getting enthusiasm. So the smartest people in the world are developing the machinery, the on-ramps, the off-ramps, and stuff like that. Now, here's something that I read the other day that I think could be spooky, and that is I read a summary of a meeting that a friend of mine who's a military analyst, not intelligence, but an analyst, he went to this meeting, they talked about crypto. And in his notes, there was no mention of Bitcoin. And the question is it possible that they're not really seeing Bitcoin as the future? They see totally crypto, totally blockchain, totally, you name it. But for example, if you had the reserve currency, why would you sign off on a currency that you actually don't own? Right, so I've been told that U.S. has Bitcoins and stuff like that, but the fact is the dollar reserve currency is a gargantuan percentage of the global. Don't forget, the Constitution of the United States protected gold. Period. QED, King's English, only gold, only silver. So Bitcoin does not have a constitution level protection. Gold had a constitutional level protection, and then they outlawed it. If Bitcoin turned into a scam, right? If it turned into a mess, if the state crushed it, would I say, oh, well, I used my best instincts and got it wrong? The answer is no, that's the problem.
So there's no chance that in the next couple of years you would allocate any percentage?
Oh, no.
Bitcoin?
No. Here's what Bitcoin's never suffered through. Bitcoin has itself been drawn down many times and rallies back, and so it's making it more and more sort of confident that it always comes back. Bitcoin is yet to go through a real life, serious global liquidity crisis. And what we don't know and what will be fascinating for me to watch is how Bitcoin responds in the next global liquidity crisis, the next really deflationary credit seizing up and stuff. And Bitcoin was a twinkle in someone's eye. Maybe Max owned it, but very few other people owned it. And so it'll be fascinating to see if Bitcoin rallies, if it falls. It'll be fascinating, for example, if at some point the state does try to come down on it and can't. So for me to get into Bitcoin, I am going to want to see Bitcoin come off the battlefield, bruised, sliced, and alive. One is you adjust the price considerably, right? That's minimum. Second is you have to adjust investors' attitudes. So when Bitcoin, if it goes through a real live correction, which it has by itself, no question, repeatedly.
Yes.
You really have to have investors say, I'm never buying that crap again. You really got to get to that point. And in 2020, for example, I actually wrote it this way. I said, imagine the opening paragraph of my annual review. I said, at the end of 2020, I said, you wake up having been in a coma for most of 2020 due to a COVID problem. And through this COVID fog, you find out that the entire global economy was shut down by a global pandemic. And every business shut down and every school shut down. And then you look in your hotel room and you look at the TV screen, and there along the bottom of CNBC's station, it says S&P's up 13%. That's wrong. Right. That's wrong. That should have forced a correction. That shows you the insanity of the markets. And so it wasn't a liquidity crisis, it was a liquidity risk. At some point, they'll have a crisis again. They had a risk with Silicon Valley Bank, you know, the three big regionals that went down, which is insanity, by the way. Let's think of the insanity of that. Three serious regional banks, I think the three largest regional banks, went insolvent because, wait for it, they bought too many treasuries.
Right. Their bonds were under.
How insane. And people say, well, they should have hedged. I go, yeah, what kind of stupid world are we in that you have to hedge treasuries as a bank to not go insolvent?
But
so we are on the cusp of something ugly. This has got to get corrected.
Collum ends with a story about his best investment, Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds. In the late 1990s, these tobacco giants were despised. They were banned from funds, facing a $142 billion lawsuit, and trading at single-digit price-to-earnings ratios with double-digit dividend yields. Collum realized the market had overreacted. The risk was real, but the price more than compensated for it. He sees a similar potential in Bitcoin. Not now, but perhaps in the future. If it's hated, bloodied, and cheap but still alive, that's when he might buy. But until then, he's watching from the sidelines.
Show me an example where a country inflated away their debt. It's hard to find one. Turns out the best one was pointed out to me first by Luke Groman, as you mentioned. Israel did it, where they had this super, like 200% inflation for about 5 years, and then it went back down to normal. And I go, what was that? It just went up and then over and then back down. I go, what just happened? Now, here's what we don't know. We don't know who backstopped them. And I'll just leave it at that. Israel's a small country. They could have been backstopped. And somehow they got through it. And it was something that tied to the Yom Kippur War or something. Who knows who backstopped Israel? But I think you reach a point where you can't backstop it. And I think the bubble we're in, they're selling it as an AI bubble. I believe there's actually a reason why they like that narrative, because they'll say, oh, it's just an AI bubble. And it's about euphoria. So this is not a euphoric bubble. I don't think it's ever going to get euphoric. I believe we're in a complacency bubble. So you've got people like you who are protecting yourself against it. But even you're buying the narrative that says they'll just not let it happen. And I believe that's the bubble. Why you can't just have a basket of Forex currencies. I don't know why it has to be the dollar at all. It seems to me that computers ought to be able to handle that. But so if the BRICS, send me an email if you start picking up on this. If the BRICS starts talking, not just individuals mumbling about Bitcoin under their breath. If we start to see tangible moves by the 25 countries and counting, BRICS, the producers of the world, as you said, start seriously talking about Bitcoin, that's a different world.
Yeah.
So that would catch my attention. The ideal world would be Bitcoin gets the crap kicked out of it. Ideal world for me, not for you.
Oh, because you want to buy it cheaper.
Bitcoin gets the crap kicked out of it, survives, and BRICS moves to it. And they go, bang. You know, the best investment I ever made was Philip Morris, R.J. Reynolds.
Oh, really?
And the reason it was the best, it wasn't the most profitable. I was a tech bull. I made a ton of money off tech. I was an idiot. It was evidence of the bubble that I was enthusiastic about tech. The best analysis I ever did was Philip Morris. It was at a PE of Philip Morris, R.J. Reynolds had a PE of 6 or 7. Had dividend yields 9 to 12%. It was hated It was despised by people. It was banned from funds. It was facing a $142 billion lawsuit. And I knew they wouldn't go bankrupt, because then you don't get paid. They just declare bankruptcy and then boom, the lawsuit's gone. And I'm thinking, what am I missing? What am I missing? This is an amazing buying opportunity. This is a low. And then one day I read an article that said, by the way, if they lose the lawsuit, they have to raise cigarettes 50 cents a pack to pay it off. And I go, oh my God, that was the missing puzzle piece. And I bought a bunch of Philip Morris and RJ Reynolds.
Really?
And I could easily imagine a time in my future where Bitcoin, where there's that moment where the missing puzzle piece shows up. Now, there's no way right now, at my current thinking, would I size Bitcoin enough to make it meaningful? And I have no interest in having an irrelevant quantity of it. Except the one argument for it is if we're truly in a life or death situation and I got to scramble out of the United States, just survive, and I can do it as the sewing diamonds in the hem of in the seam of my pants equivalent, right? I don't want to fight that fight. I'm going down with the ship if we get to that. I'm too old for this shit. So,
well, yeah,
but here's the problem. We are therefore in this, I'm going to call it the complacency bubble. Let's trademark that one, because I haven't heard someone say, it's the complacency bubble. It really is this, the Fed won't let the system hurt us. There is no evidence from the historical record that that's true. There's no evidence.
Well,
there's evidence from the last 5 years. That's not historical record.
It won't hurt the system. It's been hurting average people a lot, actually.
Right. Yeah. But just because the boomers and everyone need returns doesn't mean they get them. They're not entitled to returns, and I think the returns are going to be awful. Now, here's the problem I have. If the complacency bubble, which I think is the biggest of them all, if we're feeling this bad at the top, what's the bottom going to look like?
Yeah.
And the bottom's going to look like the fourth turning.
Dave Collum's message isn't anti-Bitcoin or anti-innovation. It's anti-complacency. He's warning investors not to confuse resilience with inevitability or government support with invincibility. Bitcoin may indeed become a global reserve asset, or it may get co-opted, regulated, or crushed. Central banks may inflate away debts, or they may trigger crises they can't control. The point isn't to predict the future with certainty, it's to stay skeptical, stay prepared, and refuse to buy into the narrative that someone else will always save the day.